Welcome back to At Lena's Romantasy Collection, your sanctuary for the spicy, the supernatural, and the dangerously obsessive. If you think ghosting a bad date is awkward, wait until you hear what happens in today's story. We have a heroine who is drowning in debt, surviving on instant noodles and pure sass. And the alpha king she accidentally ignored for 3 days. Most men send a double text when they get ghosted. Stellan Varris, he buys the entire office building, kicks down the conference room door, and demands to know why you left him on read. This story has everything you guys have been asking for. A dangerously competent billionaire who fixes heaters with his bare hands, a toucher and die moment that will ruin you for real men, and the most satisfying verbal takedown of a terrible boss I have ever written. So here is the deal. If you believe that stalking is just aggressive caring when he's a 6'6" werewolf in a bespoke suit, then smash that like button right now. It helps the algorithm find more wolf lovers like us. And if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on the bell notification because you do not want to miss new uploads. Grab your snacks, lock your doors, and let's find out what happens when you ghost a king.
Chapter 1. I was currently calculating how long I could survive on half a packet of instant noodles and a stolen office tea bag. The answer was, not long. Beatrix, are you even listening to me? I blinked, snapping back to reality. The reality was a glass-walled conference room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Sitting across from me was Mr. Henderson, the curator of the Museum of Ancient History. He was a man who looked like a melting candle and had the personality of a wet sock. "I'm listening, Mr. Henderson," I lied, clutching my notepad. My stomach gave a treacherous growl, loud enough to echo in the silent room. "As I was saying," Henderson sneered, adjusting his toupee, "the museum is facing budget reallocations. Your position as junior archivist is becoming a luxury we can't afford, especially given the recent disappearances of the Sumerian tablets. We need security, not bookworms." "I told you," I said, my spine straightening, despite my hunger. "Those tablets didn't just walk away. The logs were altered. Someone with clearance moved them. If you let me check the digital footprint, enough." Henderson slammed his hand on the table. "You are being let go, Beatrix, effective immediately. Clean out your desk." The blood drained from my face. I couldn't lose this job. I had my father's gambling debts breathing down my neck. I had rent. I had a cat named Sir Pounce-a-Lot who had a medical condition that required expensive prescription kibble. "I can't fire me," I said, my voice rising. "I'm the only one who knows the filing system. You'll be lost within a week. Please, Mr. Henderson, I just need—" Boom! The entire building shook. The coffee mug on the table rattled violently, spilling brown sludge over the white tablecloth. "What on earth?" Henderson gasped, looking around. "Is that an earthquake?" Boom! It wasn't an earthquake. It was rhythmic, heavy, purposeful, like a T-Rex approaching a Jeep in a movie, except we were on the 4th floor of a downtown office building. The glass walls of the conference room began to vibrate. "Security," Henderson squeaked, reaching for the phone. "Call the front desk." The phone line was dead. Suddenly, the scent hit me. It wasn't the smell of old paper or Henderson's cheap cologne anymore. It was ozone, pine, and something dark and electric, like a thunderstorm trapped in a bottle. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew that scent. "Oh no," I whispered, sliding down in my chair. "Oh God, no." "What is it?" Henderson demanded. The double doors to the conference room didn't just open. They exploded inward. The lock snapped like a twig, metal screeching against metal as the doors slammed against the walls with a force that cracked the plaster. And there he was. Stellan Varris, the man I had met 3 days ago on a blind date, the man who had worn a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than my entire education. He had spent 2 hours staring at my neck with eyes the color of molten silver, barely speaking, just watching. I had ghosted him. I deleted the app, blocked the number, and prayed he was just a weird, intense actuary who didn't know how to socialize. I was wrong. Stellan filled the doorway. He was 6'6" of pure, unadulterated rage. His suit jacket was straining against shoulders that were far too broad for a boardroom. His chest heaved. He scanned the room, ignoring Henderson completely, until his silver gaze locked on to me. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was. He marched across the room, the floorboards groaning under his weight, planted both massive hands on the conference table, and leaned into my personal space. I waited 72 hours, Beatrix. His voice wasn't human. It was a low, tectonic rumble that vibrated through the wood of the table and straight into my core. Why didn't you text back? The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a car. Henderson was hyperventilating in the corner. I was frozen, staring up at a man who looked like he was deciding whether to kiss me or eat me. I squeaked, then cleared my throat. My pride, which had been dormant during the firing, suddenly kicked in. I was busy. Stellan's eyes narrowed. Busy. You deleted the app. You blocked my number. I tracked your scent across 6 city blocks, through a subway station that smells like urine, and up 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was too slow. He leaned closer, his nose brushing the tip of mine. He smelled intoxicating. Do you have any idea what that does to a wolf, Beatrix, to be ignored? A wolf? Henderson piped up, his voice trembling. Who is this lunatic? Beatrix, I'm calling the police. Stellan stopped. He didn't move his body, but his head snapped toward Henderson with a terrifying, predatory slowness. The air temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Who is this? Stellan asked me, not looking away from my boss. That's Mr. Henderson, I mumbled, trying to slide further under the table. He was just firing me. Firing you, Stellan repeated. The words sounded like grinding stones. He stood up to his full height and turned to face Henderson. Stellan adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture of civility that looked utterly terrifying on a man radiating murder. You are firing her? Stellan asked, calmly. Yes, Henderson stammered, trying to muster some authority. She is incompetent and insubordinate, and I don't know who you think you are, barging in here, but I am the man who bought this building 10 minutes ago. I own the mortgage. I own the land. I own the air conditioning unit you are currently sweating under. Henderson turned pale. What? And, Stellan took a step forward, looming over the small man, Beatrix is not incompetent. She is the only reason your pathetic filing system hasn't collapsed. I checked. You can't speak to me like that, Henderson screeched, his face turning red. I am the curator. I will have you removed. Stellan smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile full of teeth, sharp and white. He leaned down, bringing his face level with Henderson's sweating forehead. Continue, Stellan whispered, the word hanging in the air like a blade. But if you speak to my future mate in that tone again, I will gouge out your vocal cords and feed them to my wolves. Henderson made a sound like a dying squeaky toy and collapsed into his chair. Stellan straightened up, dusted off his jacket, and turned back to me. The murderous rage vanished instantly, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. Now, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down next to me as if this were a casual lunch. He crossed his arms over his massive chest. Back to the important issue. You have exactly 5 minutes to explain why you didn't like the date, or I'm going to assume you're playing hard to get. And, Beatrix, he flashed that silver gaze at me, sending a shiver down my spine. I love the chase. You can't just buy a building because I didn't text you back, I hissed, leaning across the table. That is fiscally irresponsible behavior, Stellan. Stellan didn't look concerned. He looked at his watch, a piece of machinery that probably cost more than my father's entire gambling debt. It was a sound investment. Real estate in this district is up 4%, and it got me through security. Mr. Henderson was currently making a high-pitched wheezing sound, looking between Stellan and me like he was watching a nature documentary where the gazelle starts arguing with the lion. Am I still fired?" Henderson squeaked. Stellan looked at him with bored, heavy-lidded eyes. "That depends. Beatrix, do you want to work for this man?" I looked at Henderson. Then I looked at the coffee stain on the table. I thought about the paycheck, meager as it was. I thought about the eviction notice sitting on my kitchen counter, hidden under a pile of junk mail. "I need the money," I said quietly, hate burning in my gut. "So yes, I need this job." "Wrong answer," Stellan rumbled. He stood up and the room seemed to shrink again. "You don't need this job. You need a job." He turned to Henderson. "She quits. Write her a severance check. 6 months' pay for emotional distress caused by your tie." "My tie?" Henderson touched his polyester floral necktie. "It's offensive. Write the check. Now. Or I call the health inspector about the mold in the ventilation system." "There's no mold," Henderson protested. Stellan inhaled deeply through his nose, flaring his nostrils. "Vent 3, sub-basement. Black mold. Stachybotrys chartarum. It's been festering for 3 years. Shall I continue?" Henderson turned a shade of green that matched the mold. He opened his checkbook with trembling hands. 2 minutes later, I was walking out of the building, a check for 6 months of salary in my hand and a cardboard box of my belongings under my arm. Stellan walked beside me. He didn't carry a box. He just walked with a loose-limbed, predatory grace that made people on the sidewalk part like the Red Sea. "You realize I can't cash this," I said, waving the check as we hit the sidewalk. The city air was gray and smelled of rain. "He's going to cancel it the second we're out of sight." "He won't," Stellan said calmly. "My lawyers are currently freezing his assets until the check clears. I take care of my own Beatrix." I stopped walking. I turned to face him, clutching my box of office supplies, a stapler, a cactus named Spike, and 3 stolen pens. "I am not your own, Stellan." I tried to summon the energy I used on bill collectors. "We went on 1 date, you stared at me for 2 hours, you ordered a raw steak, and then you sniffed my hair when you hugged me goodbye. That is not a relationship. That is a prelude to a true crime documentary." Stellan took a step closer. He was so big he blocked out the sun. He looked down at me, his expression shifting from arrogance to something painfully earnest. "I stared because I was memorizing your face," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I ordered the steak because my wolf was hungry, and I sniffed your hair because you smell like vanilla and old books, and it settles the chaos in my head." My breath hitched. He had to stop saying things like that. It made my knees weak, and I needed my knees for walking. "Look," I sighed, adjusting the box. "Thank you for the rescue and the severance check, but I have to go. I have to find a new job before my landlord changes the locks." "I have a job for you," Stellan said immediately. "No, I haven't even told you what it is. You're going to offer me a job as your personal assistant or executive stylist or something that involves me sitting in your lap. I have dignity, Stellan. I'm an archivist. I organize history. I don't organize playboys." Stellan's jaw tightened. "I am not a playboy, and I need an archivist. My family, the clan, we have records going back 500 years. They are rotting in a basement. I need them digitized and cataloged." He named a salary. It was triple what Henderson paid me. I choked on air. That's an absurd amount of money. "It's market rate for a specialist dealing with hazardous materials. Some of the books are cursed.
or covered in arsenic. It's hazard pay. Cursed books? I deadpanned. You expect me to believe you have cursed books? I have a book that screams if you open it on a Tuesday. It's very annoying. I bit my lip. The money would pay off my dad's debt in 6 months. I could breathe again. I could buy Sir Pounce-A-Lot the good salmon pâté. But taking money from him felt dangerous. It felt like walking into a trap made of silk and steel. I'll think about it, I lied. Now goodbye, Stellan. I turned and started walking toward the subway. Beatrix, he called out. I kept walking. It's going to rain, he warned. I like rain, I yelled back over my shoulder. Seconds later, the sky opened up. It wasn't a drizzle, it was a deluge. Freezing cold water dumped onto the city, instantly soaking my thrifted blazer and filling my shoes. Great, I muttered, hugging my box to my chest to protect the cactus. Just great.
Chapter 3. I was drowning. My hair was plastered to my skull, mascara was likely running down my face like a horror movie victim, and my cardboard box was disintegrating. A sleek black limousine pulled up alongside me, moving at a slow crawl to match my pace. The window rolled down. Stellan sat inside, dry, warm, and looking annoyingly comfortable. "Get in the car, Beatrix," he said. "I'm fine," I shouted over the thunder, splashing through a puddle that went up to my ankle. "Walking builds character." "Walking builds pneumonia," he countered. "Get in. I'll drive you home." "I am not getting in your creepy rich guy abduction mobile. I have a bus pass." "The bus is delayed. I checked the schedule." "You checked the— Stop stalking the public transit system." Stellan sighed. It was a deep, long-suffering sound. The limo stopped. "What are you doing?" I wiped rain from my eyes. The door opened. Stellan stepped out. He stepped right into a murky, oil-slicked puddle. He was wearing Italian leather shoes that looked like they had been hand-stitched by angels. He didn't even look down as the water ruined them. He opened a massive black umbrella and walked over to me. He didn't say a word. He just held the umbrella over my head. The rain stopped hitting me. I looked up at the black canopy, then down at his feet. "Your shoes." "Stellan, you're ruining your shoes." "Leather can be replaced," he said, looking straight ahead. "You cannot." He started walking. Since he was holding the umbrella over me, I had to walk with him. "This is ridiculous," I grumbled, though I huddled closer to his warmth. He radiated heat like a furnace. "You're going to get wet." "I'm waterproof. Wolves have excellent coats." "Stop with the wolf thing," I muttered, shifting the soggy box. "It's a weird metaphor." "It's not a metaphor." He looked down at me, his gaze intense. "But we can pretend it is if it keeps you from running away." We walked in silence for a block. The rain hammered against the umbrella, creating a small, private world for us. I asked finally, "Why? Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." "I'm a mess, Stellan. I have debt. I have a cat with anxiety. I talk too much when I'm nervous, and I'm always nervous. Why are you chasing me?" Stellan stopped at a crosswalk. He turned to me, ignoring the honking taxis and the storm. He reached out, his large hand hesitating before he tucked a wet strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers were hot against my cold skin. "Because," he murmured, his voice rough, "for 30 years, my life has been silence. Just duty, violence, politics. Then I met you. And for the first time, the silence was gone." A small, crooked smile touched his lips. "You berated me for not using a coaster on our date. You told me my tie looked like a depressed eggplant. You are the only person in this city who isn't afraid of the Alpha King." "I was terrified," I admitted breathlessly. "I just roast people when I panic. Then panic more. I like it." My heart did a traitorous flip. I'm not taking the job. I'm not taking charity. Then take a contract. He countered smoothly. Freelance. You set the hours. You set the terms. I don't supervise you. You report to the library. You fix the archives. You send me an invoice. Strictly business. Strictly business. I raised an eyebrow. No sniffing my hair? I make no promises about the sniffing, but I will try to be discreet. I looked at him. He was soaking wet on his left side because he was angling the umbrella entirely over me. He had ruined his shoes. He had threatened my boss, and he was offering me a lifeline that would save my father's legacy. Fine, I sighed. But I pay for my own lunch. I don't want to owe you anything. Deal, Stellan said. The predator smile returned. Welcome to the clan, Beatrix. I hate you, I said, but there was no heat in it. Give it time, he rumbled, guiding me toward the subway entrance. I've only known you for 72 hours. I plan on being around for the next 72 years. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. I walked down the subway stairs, my heart pounding. I had just agreed to work for a man who claimed to be a wolf. I was either the luckiest girl in the city, or I was about to be the main character in a cautionary fairy tale. As I swiped my Metro card, I looked back up at the street. Stellan was still standing there in the pouring rain, watching me make sure I got through the gate safely. He didn't move until I disappeared underground. The man had serious boundary issues. But as I sat on the train, shivering in my wet blazer, I realized something terrifying. I was smiling. Chapter 4. The Varris Tower was not just a building. It was a monolith of glass and intimidation piercing the city's skyline. Standing in the lobby, clutching my cardboard box of supplies, I felt like a smudge on a diamond. I approached the front desk. The receptionist was a woman with sharp features and eyes that seemed to track a fly across the room. She didn't look at my ID badge. She leaned over the marble counter and sniffed me. Actually sniffed me. A long, audible inhale near my neck. "You smell like him," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating. "Go right up. Top floor. The Alpha, Mr. Varris, is expecting you." "Right," I muttered, backing away toward the elevators. HR really needs to have a seminar about personal space in this company. The elevator ride to the penthouse took long enough for me to hyperventilate 3 times. When the doors opened, I wasn't greeted by an office. I was greeted by a library that made the Museum of Ancient History look like a yard sale. It was 2 stories high, lined with dark mahogany shelves packed with leather-bound books. Spiral staircases wound up to the 2nd level. The air smelled of old paper, beeswax, and Stellan. "You came?" Stellan was standing by a massive fireplace, reading a document. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His white dress shirt was rolled up to the elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they could strangle a bear. "I signed a contract," I said, setting my box down on a sprawling oak desk that was clearly meant for me. "I need the money. Don't read into it." Stellan smirked, tossing the document onto a side table. "I wouldn't dream of it." "So," I said, gesturing to the room, "this is the disaster zone?" "It's a mess," Stellan admitted, walking over. "My ancestors were hoarders. There are property deeds from the 1700s mixed with takeout menus from last week. I need it digitized. All of it." I walked to the nearest shelf and pulled out a heavy black volume. The leather felt warm. The title was in a language I didn't recognize. Latin? No. Older. "Careful," Stellan warned, stepping closer. "That one bites." "Ha ha," I said dryly. "You're so funny. Next, you'll tell me the librarian is a ghost." I opened the book. A puff of dust hit me in the face. I sneezed violently. As I did, the book snapped shut with a loud thwack, narrowly missing my nose. I jumped back, dropping the tome. It landed on the rug with a thud. "I told you," Stellan said, picking it up casually. "It doesn't like sudden noises. It's sensitive." I stared at him, then at the book. It snapped shut on its own. It has a spring mechanism, right? A prank book? "Let's go with that," Stellan said, placing it on a high shelf. He turned to me, leaning his hip against the desk. "Here is your keycard. It gives you access to the building 24/7. You have unlimited budget for supplies, and—" He paused, his expression turning serious. "You are not to leave this floor without me or my head of security, Basker." "Excuse me," I bristled. "I'm an archivist, Stellan, not a prisoner. I can go to the lobby if I want a coffee." "The coffee machine here is better," he countered. "And I have enemies, Beatrix, business rivals. Now that you are working for me, you are a target." "A target?" I laughed nervously. "I organize files. Who wants to target the filer? The Dewey Decimal System gang?" Stellan didn't laugh. He stepped into my personal space, his silver eyes burning. "You are under my protection now. That means you follow my protocols. No wandering, no leaving the building alone at night. Do we have a deal?" I looked at his intense face. He wasn't joking. The air around him crackled with that same thunderstorm energy I felt at the museum. "Fine," I grumbled, pulling a pen from my pocket. "But if I get kidnapped by a rival CEO, I'm charging you for overtime." "Understood." Stellan smiled, and for a second, the room felt dangerously hot. "Get to work, Beatrix." Chapter 5. By noon, I had categorized 3 shelves and discovered that the Varris family had a very suspicious amount of involvement in livestock management during the 1800s. My stomach gave a loud, traitorous growl. I reached into my bag and pulled out my lunch, a cup of instant noodles, chicken supreme, on sale, and a thermos of hot water I'd brought from home because I refused to use the fancy office machine. "What is that smell?" I looked up. Stellan was standing at the top of the spiral staircase, looking down at me with an expression of horror. "It's lunch," I said, peeling back the foil lid. "Chicken supreme." Stellan descended the stairs. He moved silently, like a shadow. "That is not chicken. That is sodium and sadness pressed into a cup. Put it down." "I paid for this," I said defensively, shielding my noodles. "It cost 45 cents, and it is delicious." "Beatrix," Stellan sighed, stopping in front of my desk. "I have a private chef. He made roast duck with a cherry reduction. There is enough for 2. "No," I said firmly. "We agreed. I pay for my own lunch. I am an independent contractor. If I eat your duck, it's a slippery slope. Next thing I know, I'm accepting cars and clothes, and I lose my independence. I eat the noodles." Stellan stared at me. His nostrils flared. Chapter 5. By noon, I had categorized 3 shelves and discovered that the Varris family had a very suspicious amount of involvement in livestock management during the 1800s. My stomach gave a loud, traitorous growl. I reached into my bag and pulled out my lunch, a cup of instant noodles, chicken supreme on sale, and a thermos of hot water I'd brought from home because I refused to use the fancy office machine. What is that smell? I looked up. Stellan was standing at the top of the spiral staircase, looking down at me with an expression of horror. "It's lunch," I said, peeling back the foil lid. "Chicken supreme." Stellan descended the stairs. He moved silently, like a shadow. "That is not chicken. That is sodium and sadness pressed into a cup. Put it down." "I paid for this," I said defensively, shielding my noodles. "It cost 45 cents, and it is delicious." "Beatrix," Stellan sighed, stopping in front of my desk. "I have a private chef. He made roast duck with a cherry reduction. There is enough for two." "No," I said firmly. "We agreed. I pay for my own lunch. I am an independent contractor. If I eat your duck, it's a slippery slope. Next thing I know, I'm accepting cars and clothes, and I lose my independence. I eat the noodles." Stellan stared at me. His nostrils flared. "You are stubborn." "I'm principled." I took a bite of the noodles. They were slightly undercooked and crunchy. I smiled through the pain. Al dente." Stellan looked like he was in physical pain watching me eat. He paced back and forth in front of my desk, running a hand through his dark hair. "Stop pacing," I said. "You're making me dizzy. Go eat your duck." "I can't," he growled. "My wolf is agitated. It doesn't like seeing you starve." "I'm not starving, I'm budgeting. And stop with the wolf talk. It's a very committed bit, Stellan, but it's getting weird." Stellan stopped pacing. He walked out of the room without a word. "Finally," I muttered, taking another sad bite. 2 minutes later, he returned. He was carrying a silver tray. He slammed it down on my desk, right next to my noodle cup. On the tray was a massive, seared steak, a pile of roasted potatoes, and a glass of red wine. "Eat," he commanded. "Stellan," I stood up. "I said no." He leaned over the desk, his face inches from mine. His eyes were swirling with that molten silver color again. "Beatrix, this isn't charity. This is a health and safety requirement. If you pass out from malnutrition, you might drop a heavy book on your foot, and then I have to fill out paperwork. I hate paperwork." He pushed the tray toward me. "Eat the steak. I will deduct the cost of the ingredients," he calculated quickly, $4 from your first paycheck. Does that satisfy your insane pride?" I looked at the steak. It smelled heavenly. I looked at my noodle cup, which was rapidly cooling into a gelatinous puck. $4? I asked suspiciously. "Market price. Wholesale beef." I knew he was lying. That steak cost more than my rent. But my stomach roared again, betraying me. "Fine," I grumbled, swapping the noodles for the fork. "But I'm watching the payroll deductions, Varris. If you undercharge me, I walk." Stellan sat down in the chair opposite me, crossing his arms. He didn't eat. He just watched me. "Are you going to stare at me the whole time?" I asked, around a mouthful of potato. "Yes," he said simply. "I enjoy watching you fuel up. It's soothing." "You're a freak," I said, but I took another bite. "I know, but I'm a freak who provides excellent steak." Chapter 6. A week passed. I settled into a rhythm. I organized the archives, avoided the biting books, and fought Stellan every single day about lunch. It was 8 p.m. on a Friday. I had stayed late to finish digitizing a ledger from 1920. My eyes burned and my back ached. "You're still here." I jumped. Stellan was leaning against the library doorframe. He looked tired. His tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck, and his top button was popped. He looked devastatingly handsome. "Just finishing up," I said, saving the file. "I'm heading out now." "I'll walk you down," he said. We stepped into the private elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing us in a small mirrored box. The silence was heavy. Not awkward, just thick, charged. I watched Stellan in the reflection of the doors. He was staring at the back of my neck again. "You're doing it again," I whispered. "Doing what?" "Staring at my jugular. It makes me feel like a juice box." Stellan let out a huff of laughter.
He took a step closer. I could feel the heat radiating off him. "I'm not looking at your jugular, Beatrix. I'm scenting you." I turned around to face him. The elevator seemed to shrink. "Scenting me? Like perfume?" "No," he murmured, taking another step. We were inches apart now. "Checking your stress levels, checking for threats. You smell tired and worried." He was right. I was worried. My rent was due in 2 days, and even with the new job, the first paycheck hadn't cleared yet. I was scraping the bottom of my savings. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired."
Stellan raised his hand. He grazed his knuckles down my cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to my toes. I stopped breathing. "You are a terrible liar," he whispered. "Your heart rate jumps when you lie. It's doing it right now. Thump, thump, thump." "Stop listening to my heart," I said weakly. "It's rude." "I can't help it," he admitted. He leaned down, his face burying into the crook of my neck. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering breath. "God, you smell good, like home." I should have pushed him away. I should have reminded him about the strictly business rule. Instead, my head fell back against the elevator wall, exposing my throat to him. "Stellan," I breathed. "I know," he groaned against my skin. "I'm crossing a line. I'm breaking the rules." "Yes," I agreed, my hands gripping the lapels of his shirt. "You are." The elevator chimed. Ding! The spell broke. Stellan pulled back, his eyes blown wide and black. He looked shaken. "I apologize," he said, his voice rough. He straightened his shirt, putting distance between us. "That was inappropriate." "It's fine," I said, my voice trembling. "Just don't do it again." "I'll try," he said, staring at the opening doors. "But Beatrix, you make it very hard to be a gentleman." "Good thing you're a wolf, then," I quipped, trying to lighten the mood as I stepped into the lobby. Stellan didn't smile. He looked at me with a tragic intensity. That is exactly the problem. I walked out into the cool night air, my skin still burning where he had touched me. I was in trouble. Deep, expensive trouble. Chapter 7. The high of the elevator moment crashed the second I opened my apartment door. My apartment was a shoebox in the bad part of town. It smelled like damp plaster and my neighbor's cabbage soup. Sir Pounce-a-Lot meowed at me from the counter, sitting next to a bright red envelope. An eviction notice. Final warning. I dropped my bag and ripped it open. My father's old gambling debt, the one I thought I had under control, had accrued interest. A collections agency, which I suspected was just a loan shark in a cheap suit, had bought the debt and was demanding immediate payment, or they would seize my assets. I didn't have assets. I had a cat and a cactus. I sank onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The check from Henderson hadn't cleared yet. Stellan's first payment wasn't due for another week. I had $40 in my bank account. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay, B, think." I looked at the phone. Stellan's number was saved under the Wolf of Wall Street. I could call him. I knew with a certainty that rattled my bones that if I called him and whispered the word help, he would show up with a briefcase of cash and probably break the legs of the loan shark. But I couldn't do it. My father had died begging for money. He had lost his dignity, his pride, and eventually his life to debt. I had promised myself I would never be beholden to anyone. If I took Stellan's money, the power dynamic would shift. I would be the charity case, the poor girl he saved. I couldn't be that. I needed to be his equal or nothing. I stood up and walked to my dresser. I pulled out the small jewelry box. Inside was my mother's vintage watch. It was the only thing I had left of her. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I grabbed my coat and the watch. There was a pawn shop on 4th Street that stayed open late. It wouldn't pay the whole debt, but it would buy me a week to wait for the paychecks.
I walked out into the cold night. The wind bit through my coat. I felt small and fragile, a stark contrast to how safe I felt in Stellan's tower. As I walked, my phone buzzed, a text from Stellan. "Did you get home safe?" I stared at the screen. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to tell him I was scared. "Yes," I typed back. "Safe and sound. Good night, Stellan." I hit send. Then I walked into the pawn shop and sold my heart for $300.
Chapter 8. 2 days later, the universe decided to kick me while I was down. The heater in my apartment died. It was 3 in the morning. The temperature outside was below freezing. Inside, I could see my breath. I was buried under 4 blankets, wearing a hat and mittens, shivering so hard the bed frame rattled. Sir Pouncelot was burrowed into my armpit for warmth. I couldn't afford an emergency repairman. I just had to survive the night. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. Who was knocking at 3 a.m.? The loan shark? I grabbed my trusty cast iron skillet, my only weapon, and crept to the door. "Who is it?" I chattered. "Open the door, Beatrix." "Stellan." I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Stellan stood in the hallway. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt. He looked frantic. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my teeth chattering. He didn't answer. He pushed past me into the apartment. He stopped in the middle of the living room and inhaled. "It's freezing," he growled. "Why didn't you call me?" "My heater broke," I said, closing the door. "I was going to call the super in the morning." "You are hypothermic," he accused. He ripped the blanket off his shoulders. Wait, did he bring a blanket? And wrapped it around me. Then he marched to the radiator unit in the corner. "Stellan, what are you doing?" "Fixing it." He crouched down. He pulled a toolkit from his back pocket. I watched in bewilderment as the billionaire Alpha King started dismantling my radiator. "You know how to fix a radiator?" I asked, huddling in his blanket. It smelled like cedar and expensive cologne. "I know how to fix everything," he grunted, twisting a valve. A jet of black sludge sprayed out, hitting him square in the chest. It soaked his t-shirt. "Oh my God!" I gasped. He didn't flinch. He just wiped the grease from his eyes and kept working. "It's a blocked valve. Hand me that wrench." I handed it to him. I watched the muscles in his back shift as he worked. He didn't care about the dirt. He didn't care about the cold. He just cared about fixing it. 10 minutes later, the radiator gave a clanking shudder and hissed. Heat began to radiate into the room. Stellan stood up. He was covered in soot, grease, and water. He looked ridiculous. He looked incredible. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why didn't you just hire someone to come fix it? You're Stellan Varris. You don't do manual labor." He turned to me, wiping his hands on a rag from his pocket. "Because," he said, his voice low and rough, "if I hired someone, you would have sent them away out of pride. And I woke up feeling cold. I knew it wasn't me. It was you." "That's impossible," I whispered. "You can't feel when I'm cold." "I can," he said, stepping closer. He radiated heat. He reached out and cupped my face. His hands were rough, calloused, and warm. "Are you warm now, Beatrix?" "Yes," I breathed, leaning into his touch. "I'm warm." He looked at my lips. I wanted him to kiss me. I wanted to forget the debt and the pawn shop and just be with him. But he didn't kiss me. He kissed my forehead. "Go back to sleep," he whispered. "I'll stay until morning to make sure it holds." He sat in my lumpy armchair, covered in grease, and watched over me like a gargoyle, and for the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. Chapter 9. Monday morning, I was back in the archives. Stellan had left my apartment before I woke up, leaving a note that said, "Don't touch the radiator. It's temperamental, like you." I was smiling as I worked, until I opened a file labeled Acquisitions 2018. It was a ledger of donations to the Museum of Ancient History. I recognized the font. It was Henderson's typing, but the names were wrong. Item 405, Sumerian Clay Tablet. Donor, Carrion LLC. Carrion LLC. I frowned. I typed the name into the Varris database. The screen flashed red. Warning, known rogue entity. My blood ran cold. The carrion wasn't a company. In the Varris files, it was listed as a hostile pack exiled. I kept digging. I cross-referenced the dates. Every time an artifact went missing from the museum, Henderson had received a consulting fee from Carrion LLC. Henderson wasn't just stealing. He was funneling ancient artifacts that might have supernatural properties, to a rogue wolf pack. I realized with a jolt why Henderson had been so desperate to fire me. I was getting too close to the paper trail. And Stellan? Stellan had bought the museum building. He had frozen Henderson's assets. "Oh no," I whispered. He made himself a target. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking. I had to tell Stellan. I opened our text thread. Me, Stellan, I found something. Henderson is working for Carrion LLC. They're stealing artifacts. You need to come to the library, now. I hit send. I stared at the screen, waiting for the 3 dots. Nothing. I tried to call him, straight to voicemail. A feeling of dread settled in my stomach. The Carrion pack. Rogues. Stellan had mentioned business rivals, but this was different. These were the bad guys. I heard a sound, a soft click from the library entrance. "Stellan?" I called out, standing up. The lights in the library flickered and died. The emergency red mood lighting bathed the room in a sinister glow. "Not quite," a voice hissed from the darkness. It wasn't Stellan's deep rumble. It was a scratchy, high-pitched voice. I grabbed the only weapon I had on my desk, the heavy, leather-bound book Stellan had warned me about, the one that bites. "Who's there?" I shouted, backing towards the spiral staircase. "We've been looking for those files," the voice sneered. Shadows detached themselves from the bookshelves. 3 men. They moved with a jerky, unnatural grace. Their eyes reflected the red light like animals. "Give us the drive, little archivist," the leader said, stepping into the light. He had a scar running down his chin. "And maybe we won't eat you." My phone buzzed in my hand, a text from Stellan. "I'm coming. Run."
Chapter 10. Run. It was excellent advice, except I was on the top floor of a skyscraper, trapped in a library with 3 men who looked like they chewed glass for fun. "I don't have the drive," I lied, backing up until my hips hit the oak desk. I clutched the biting book to my chest. "You're holding it," the scarred man snarled. He sniffed the air. "You smell like the king. It makes me want to vomit." "The feeling is mutual," I snapped, my sass reflex kicking in despite the terror. "You smell like wet dog and bad life choices." The man growled, a literal growl, his jaw unhinged slightly, his teeth looking too sharp, too long. "Get her," he ordered. The 2 lackeys lunged. I didn't think. I threw the book. "Open!" I screamed at the book. The leather tome flew through the air. As it neared the first lackey's face, the cover snapped open. It didn't scream, it shrieked, a high-pitched sonic wail that shattered the glass water pitcher on my desk. The lackeys clutched their ears, stumbling back. "It really is cursed!" I yelled triumphantly. I sprinted for the spiral staircase. I needed to get to the elevator. I needed to get to Basker, the security head. I made it to the bottom of the stairs when the leader tackled me. We crashed onto the Persian rug. The wind was knocked out of me. He was heavy, impossibly heavy. "Stupid girl," he hissed, his hand closing around my throat. "Varris isn't here to save you." "Get off me!" I gasped, clawing at his face. My nails raped his skin, but he didn't bleed. His skin felt like hide. "We're going to leave a message for the king," the man smiled, raising a fist. Ding! The elevator doors at the far end of the room slid open. The leader froze. Step, step, step. Stellan walked out. He wasn't running, he wasn't shouting, he was walking with a terrifying, deadly calm. But his eyes were glowing solid gold, and shadows seemed to be bleeding off his shoulders like smoke. "Get off her." The voice wasn't human. It was the sound of mountains cracking. The leader scrambled off me, backing away. "Blackwood, we just wanted the files." Stellan didn't look at the files. He looked at the red mark forming on my neck where the man had grabbed me. "You touched her," Stellan whispered. He ripped his suit jacket off, buttons popping and pinging across the floor. "You touched my mate." Stellan threw his head back and roared, his body contorted, bones snapping and reshaping in a gruesome, beautiful display of power. In seconds, the man was gone. In his place stood a massive, silver-furred wolf the size of a pony. The Silver King. He looked at the rogues. He bared teeth that were the length of daggers. And then he lunged. I scrambled backward, shielding my eyes as the library turned into a war zone. I heard screams, I heard the crunch of furniture, and above it all, the terrifying, triumphant roar of a monster who had finally found a reason to let loose. I had been hired as an archivist's assistant. I had dated a CEO. But looking at the silver beast tearing through his enemies to get to me, I realized the truth. I had fallen in love with a king.
Chapter 11. I had seen action movies. I knew what a fight looked like, but watching a werewolf fight was not a fight. It was a natural disaster. Stellan, the Silver King, was a blur of mercury and violence. The leader of the rogues, the man who had choked me, didn't stand a chance. Stellan hit him with the force of a freight train, jaws snapping, furniture shattered. A mahogany table that probably cost more than my college tuition was reduced to splinters as Stellan threw a rogue through it. I pressed myself against the oak desk, clutching the screaming book, which had finally shut up, and tried to remember how to breathe. It was over in less than a minute. The rogues were gone, either unconscious or having fled down the fire escape with their tails tucked between their legs. The library was silent, save for the heavy, wet panting of the massive wolf standing in the center of the ruin. He was bleeding. A slash across his flank stained his silver fur crimson. "Stellan?" I whispered. The wolf's head snapped toward me. His eyes were wild, dilated, and glowing gold. He took a step toward me, growling low in his throat. It was a terrifying sound, primal and hungry. My instinct screamed run, but my brain, the part of me that had roasted him for his tie, the part that had let him fix my radiator, held my ground. "You're bleeding," I said, my voice shaking but audible, "and you wrecked the feng shui of the room." The wolf paused. He huffed, a noise that sounded suspiciously like a scoff. The golden glow in his eyes faded slightly, returning to that familiar molten silver. He lowered his massive head, his ears flattening. He looked ashamed. He looked at the wreckage, then at me, and whined. "Oh, don't give me the sad puppy eyes," I said, my legs trembling as I stood up. "You just saved my life. You're a very good boy." I winced. I can't believe I just called a billionaire CEO a good boy. The wolf huffed again. Then he turned away from me, moving behind the remains of a sofa. I heard the sickening crack of bones realigning, a wet, tearing sound that made me cover my ears. A moment later, a hand reached up to grab the back of the sofa. Stellan rose. He was human again. He was also stark naked. I immediately squeezed my eyes shut and spun around. "Clothes, Stellan, human protocols." "Beatrix," he rasped. His voice was wrecked, like he had swallowed gravel. "I'm hurt." I opened my eyes and turned back. He was leaning heavily against the sofa, clutching his side. Blood was welling between his fingers. The rage was gone from his face, replaced with a pale, sweaty vulnerability. "Oh God," I gasped, rushing forward. I grabbed his ruined shirt from the floor and pressed it against his wound. "You're really hurt. We need a hospital." "No hospital," he grunted, his weight leaning on me. He was heavy, scorching hot. "Heals fast. Just need rest and whiskey." "You need stitches, you stubborn oaf," I argued, wrapping my arm around his waist to support him. "Come on, lean on me. Let's get you to the bedroom." "You didn't run," he murmured, looking down at me with glazed eyes as we stumbled toward the spiral staircase. "I told you I needed the job, and someone has to clean up this mess."
"I'll buy new furniture," he slurred. "Shut up, Stellan," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "Just walk."
Chapter 12. The master bathroom was larger than my entire apartment. It was all black marble and gold fixtures, which felt very on brand for a dramatic werewolf king. I had Stellan sitting on the edge of the massive bathtub. He was wearing a pair of boxers I had found in his drawer. Thank God. I was kneeling between his legs with a first aid kit, cleaning the gash on his side. "This is going to sting," I warned, soaking a cotton pad in antiseptic. "Do it," he gritted out. I pressed the pad to the wound. Stellan hissed, his hands gripping the edge of the tub so hard I heard the marble creak. His muscles bunched under my touch, hard as iron. "Sorry," I whispered, working quickly. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," he said, his breathing heavy. "They came for me, for the files. Henderson, he was laundering artifacts to fund Varick's pack. I should have known sooner." "You can't know everything," I said, applying a butterfly bandage. The wound was already closing, the skin knitting together before my eyes. "It's supernatural healing. That's handy. Saves on copays." I sat back on my heels, wiping my bloody hands on a towel. "There, you'll live." Stellan didn't look at his side. He looked at me. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and touched my neck, right where the rogue had choked me. "He bruised you," Stellan whispered, his eyes darkening. "I should have killed him slower." "Stellan," I said softly, capturing his hand. "I'm fine. It's just a bruise. It matches my thrift store aesthetic." He didn't smile. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine. He was still radiating heat, smelling of copper and antiseptic and wolf. "When I shifted, I thought you would scream. I thought you would look at me and see a monster." "I saw a monster," I admitted. He flinched, pulling back, but I held his face. "I saw a monster who was protecting me. I saw the guy who held an umbrella over me in the rain. You're a lot of things, Stellan. Scary? Yes. Dramatic? Absolutely. But you're not a monster to me." Stellan let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He pulled me into his chest, burying his face in my hair. His arms wrapped around me like steel bands, holding me so tight it was hard to breathe. But I didn't complain. I held him back. "Stay," he commanded into my hair. "Stay here tonight, in my bed. I won't touch you. I need to hear your heartbeat, to know you're safe." I should have said no. I should have gone to the guest room, but I was exhausted, and the adrenaline was crashing, leaving me shaking. "Okay, I'll stay, but if you snore, I'm kicking you." We slept in his massive bed. He kept his word, he stayed on his side, but he kept one hand on my ankle, like an anchor. I fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, feeling safer than I ever had in my life. I didn't know that safety was a lie. I didn't know that while I slept, the secrets he had been keeping were waiting for me on his desk, ready to tear us apart. Chapter 13. I woke up alone. The bed was cold on Stellan's side. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, I forgot everything. I just stretched, feeling the luxury of high thread count sheets. Then the memories of the wolves and the blood came rushing back. "Stellan?" I called out, sitting up. No answer. I got out of bed, wearing one of his dress shirts that I had stolen the night before. I padded barefoot out of the bedroom and down the hall toward the library. "Stellan, are you—" I stopped. The library was empty. The broken furniture had been cleared away, efficient, but Stellan wasn't there. I walked over to the massive oak desk, my desk. Sitting right in the center, on top of my keyboard, was a small velvet box. My heart skipped a beat. A gift? I opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond ring or earrings. It was a watch. My watch. My mother's vintage watch. The one I had pawned 3 days ago in the middle of the night to pay off the loan shark. I stared at it, my blood turning to ice. How did he get this? I hadn't told him. I hadn't told anyone.
Next to the box was a file folder. It was labeled Kross Debt Resolution. I opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was a receipt, a bank transfer confirmation dated 4 days ago. Amount? $45,000. Recipient? J.D. Collections. Status? Paid in full. I stopped breathing. The date? It was from the day I started working here. He had paid it days ago, before I pawned the watch, before the heater broke, before I panicked about the eviction. He had known. He had known about the debt the entire time. He had paid it off without asking me, without telling me. "You found it." I spun around. Stellan was standing in the doorway. He was dressed in a fresh suit, looking impeccable, though his movements were slightly stiff from his injury. He was holding a tray of coffee and pastries. He looked at the file in my hand, and his expression hardened. "I can explain," he said. "You bought me," I whispered, my voice shaking with a rage that eclipsed the fear. "You investigated me, you found my father's debt, and you paid it off like I was an acquisition." "I helped you," Stellan said, setting the tray down. "Beatrix, that debt was dangerous. Those men are criminals." "I can explain," he said. "You bought me," I whispered, my voice shaking with a rage that eclipsed the fear. "You investigated me, you found my father's debt, and you paid it off like I was an acquisition." "I helped you," Stellan said, setting the tray down. "Beatrix, that debt was dangerous. Those men are criminals." "I know they are criminals," I shouted, slamming the file down. "But it was my debt. It was my burden. I was handling it." "You were pawning your mother's heirlooms," Stellan shot back, his voice rising. "I tracked your scent to the pawn shop. Do you have any idea how that felt, knowing my mate was selling her history to buy time?" "I am not your mate," I yelled. "I am your employee. I told you, Stellan. I told you I didn't want charity. I wanted to earn my way out. I wanted my dignity." "Dignity doesn't keep you warm," Stellan roared, the alpha tone slipping out. "I have the money. It means nothing to me. Why should you suffer when I can fix it with a signature?" "Because you took my choice." I grabbed the watch, clutching it so hard the metal dug into my palm. "You let me worry. You let me freeze in that apartment. You let me walk to the pawn shop knowing you had already paid it. Why? Were you waiting for me to beg? Were you waiting for me to come to you?" Stellan flinched. "No, I was waiting for the right time to tell you. I didn't want you to feel owned." "Well, you failed," I spat out, "because that is exactly how I feel. I feel like a pet you bought to make yourself feel benevolent." I ripped the keycard from around my neck and threw it on the desk. "I quit." "Beatrix," Stellan growled, stepping forward to block my path. "You are not leaving. It isn't safe. The rogues—" "I don't care about the rogues." I pushed past him. He could have stopped me. He could have pinned me with one hand, but he didn't touch me. He let me pass. I marched to the elevator, jamming the button. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and angry. "If you walk out that door," Stellan said quietly from behind me, "I can't protect you." I turned to look at him one last time. He looked devastated, a king who had given everything and still lost. "Good," I said, the doors sliding shut between us. "I'm done being protected. I'll take my chances with the wolves."
Chapter 14. My apartment felt colder than it ever had before. The radiator, the one Stellan had fixed with his bare hands, was working perfectly, humming in the corner. But the cold wasn't in the air, it was in me. 2 days. It had been 2 days since I threw the keycard at the Alpha King and stormed out. I sat on my lumpy couch, staring at the ceiling. Sir Pounce-a-Lot was sitting on my chest, purring loudly, clearly unbothered by my existential crisis. "He lied to me," I told the cat. "He manipulated my life. He paid my debt so he could play hero." Sir Pounce-a-Lot blinked slowly. He looked at the empty bowl where his expensive salmon pâté usually was. He meowed, a sound that clearly translated to, "He bought me the good food, you idiot. Go back."
I groaned, covering my face with a pillow. The cat was right. My pride was a shield, yes, but lately it had started to feel more like a cage. Stellan hadn't paid the debt to control me. He had paid it because he couldn't stand the thought of me suffering. He had done it clumsily, arrogantly, and without asking, because he was a wolf who solved problems with brute force and checkbooks. But he had let me leave. He hadn't locked me in the tower. He hadn't forced me to stay. He had respected my no, even when it destroyed him. "I'm an idiot," I whispered. I stood up. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed the file folder with the debt receipt, and I grabbed a permanent marker. I didn't take a taxi. I took the subway, channeling my rage and determination into every step. When I reached Varris Tower, the receptionist didn't stop me. She took one look at my face and pressed the button for the penthouse elevator. "He's been growling at the photocopier for 48 hours, she whispered fearfully. "Please fix him." I rode the elevator up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I forced my breathing to steady. I wasn't going back as a charity case. I was going back as a negotiator. The elevator doors opened. The library was dark. The curtains were drawn.
Stellan was sitting behind the oak desk. He wasn't working. He was staring at the empty chair where I usually sat. He looked wrecked. His tie was gone, his shirt was unbuttoned, and a shadow of stubble covered his jaw. He held a glass of whiskey that looked like it hadn't been touched in hours. He looked up when I entered. His silver eyes widened, flashing with a desperate, hungry hope. "Beatrix?" he rasped. I didn't smile. I marched across the room, my boots thudding on the Persian rug. I slammed the file folder down on the desk in front of him. "We are renegotiating," I announced. Stellan blinked, slowly standing up. "Renegotiating?" "Yes." I opened the folder. I took the permanent marker and wrote a large, bold figure on the receipt. $45,000, plus 4% interest. That is what I owe you. "Beatrix, I don't want the money." "Quiet, Alpha," I snapped. "I'm speaking." His mouth clicked shut. A spark of amusement and arousal flared in his eyes. "I will work off this debt," I declared, pointing the marker at him. "I will continue as the clan archivist. You will pay me my salary, and 50% of every paycheck goes directly back to you until the debt is cleared. It will take me 2 years, maybe 3. I leaned over the desk, invading his space. "I am not a pet you rescued. I am an investment, and I intend to provide a return on that investment. Those are my terms. Take it or leave it." Stellan looked at the scribbled numbers. Then he looked at me. The darkness in his face lifted, replaced by a blinding, triumphant intensity. "You want to work for me for 3 years?" he asked softly. "I want to work with you," I corrected. "And I have one more condition." "Name it." "You are terrible at scheduling. You missed 3 meetings last week to stare at me. So I am also taking over your calendar. You don't breathe unless I put it in the spreadsheet." Stellan let out a laugh, a deep, rumbling sound that healed the cracks in my heart. He walked around the desk. He didn't hesitate this time. He grabbed my waist and hoisted me up onto the desk, sweeping the papers aside. "Accepted," he growled, stepping between my knees. "But I have a counteroffer." "I'm listening," I breathed, my hands finding his shoulders. "You can be the archivist. You can be the scheduler. You can be the boss. But you will also be the queen, and the queen does not sleep in her apartment. She sleeps here with me." I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer. "Deal," I whispered, "but you're still paying for lunch." Chapter 15. 6 months later, the Varris Tower was buzzing. It was the night of the Winter Solstice Gala, the most important event in the supernatural calendar. Every alpha, clan leader, and dignitary in the city was gathering in the ballroom downstairs. I was currently in the penthouse trying to locate the Alpha King. "Stellan!" I shouted, checking my watch. "We have to be downstairs in 10 minutes. The delegation from the Onyx Pack is already drinking all the champagne." I marched into the bedroom. I was wearing a floor-length gown of midnight blue silk, Stellan's choice, and the vintage watch on my wrist. I felt powerful. I felt happy. The bathroom door opened. Stellan walked out. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a sin, adjusting his cufflinks. He stopped when he saw me. "You look—" He trailed off, his eyes darkening to that familiar molten gold. "Dangerous." "I look on schedule," I corrected, walking over to fix his tie, "which is more than I can say for you. Stop looking at me like I'm dinner. We have guests." "Let them wait," he grumbled, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me flush against him. "I'm the king. They can wait for the king." "They can wait for the king," I agreed, patting his cheek, "but they won't wait for the open bar. Now, let's go." I untangled myself from him and headed for the door. "I'm going down to check the seating chart. Do not be late, Varris. If you aren't at the podium in 5 minutes, I'm giving your speech for you." "You wrote the speech," he pointed out. "You'd do a better job." I rolled my eyes and stepped into the elevator. The ballroom was chaos, beautiful, glittering chaos. I spent 20 minutes putting out fires. Literally, one fire elemental had gotten too excited near the curtains and soothing the egos of rival pack leaders. My phone buzzed in my clutch. "Where are you?" "Stellan." I ignored it. I was busy arguing with a vampire about why he couldn't smoke inside. Buzz. "Beatrix, the podium is lonely." I smirked, declining the call. He was so dramatic. Buzz. 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 I finally stepped away from the vampire and pulled out my phone. 5 missed texts. "Are you ignoring me? I can smell you near the buffet. Pick up the phone, queen." I started typing a reply. "Hold your horses, wolf boy. I'm coming." Boom. The double doors of the ballroom slammed open. The music stopped. The chatter died. Every head turned. Stellan stood in the doorway. He looked magnificent and terrifying. He scanned the room, ignoring the hundreds of terrified guests, until his eyes locked on me, standing by the chocolate fountain. He marched across the dance floor. The crowd parted instantly. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of me, looming over me, blocking out the light of the chandeliers. He placed his hands on my shoulders, looking down with intense, frantic seriousness. "I waited 3 minutes, Beatrix." The room was silent. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Why didn't you text back?" I looked up at him. I saw the humor dancing deep in his golden eyes. I saw the love that terrified him and grounded him. I saw my partner. I reached up, smoothing the lapel of his tuxedo. "Because," I said, my voice ringing clear in the silent room, "I was busy running your kingdom, Your Majesty. Someone has to make sure the vampires don't set the curtains on fire." Stellan stared at me for a beat. Then a slow, devastating grin spread across his face. "Fair point," he rumbled. "But next time, text back, or I'll buy the phone company and shut it down." "You would," I sighed. "I would," he agreed. He leaned down and kissed me, right there in front of the entire supernatural world. It was a kiss that claimed, a kiss that promised, and a kiss that said I would never have to pay a debt, financial or emotional, ever again. As the crowd erupted into polite applause, Stellan pulled back, resting his forehead against mine. "Happy solstice, Bea," he whispered. "Happy solstice, Stellan," I smiled. "Now come on. I think I saw Henderson trying to sneak into the buffet. Let's go scare him." Stellan laughed, offering me his arm. "After you, my queen."